Omar. Welcome to the southern tip of India. Metaphorically, you're the one K and this is the other K towards Kanyakumaris. I want to start this conversation. We're going to talk about dissent, freedom, stuff. I try and translate something that all of us have grown listening to about Kashmir. So in Tamil, you can say, in the bhumiyil swargam enral, adi inge. इस धरती पर अगर स्वर्ग है तो यही है. If there is a heaven on this earth, it is here, and that is Kashmir. We will get to ask Mr. Abdullah, what is the state of the paradise? But before that, an overview on how you see dissent, how you see liberty, how you see freedom playing out. The weaponization of language, the weaponization of symbols. Frankly, conversations have ended. So how do you see things playing out?
Well, I think most sensible thinking people will see the situation with a fair degree of concern. Because dissent is not just an abstract concept. I mean, it's enshrined in our constitution in the form of the right to free speech. And therefore, we should have no hesitation in being dissenters or being in a position to put a point of view that may be unpopular or may differ from the point of view of the government or the establishment. But the fact is that we are far removed from there. And not just vis-a-vis our ability to criticize the central government, but we've seen numerous examples at state levels as well, where laws of preventive detention and things like that are weaponized to arrest and detain critics of governments. Small things like Facebook posts can result in arbitrary arrests. Cartoons have seen people arrested. Comedy sketches, the same sort of result. And none of this is healthy for this country, because at the end of the day, democracy and I mean, no less a person than the Prime Minister recently said that he considers India to be the mother of democracy. So if India is the mother of democracy, then I believe dissent is democracy's firstborn child. And rather than sort of caring for it and giving it space, what we seem to be doing is throttling it. And I come from a state where perhaps more than any other, well, I came from a state, now I belong unfortunately to a union territory, but we've done more than perhaps anybody else to set an example for how not to conduct oneself. I've been at the receiving end of it. I spent 8 months in detention for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Why? Because the government of the day felt that I would dissent. I would disagree with what they did on the 5th of August 2019, which is what I would have done. But I wouldn't have done it violently, I wouldn't have done it illegally, I wouldn't have done it unconstitutionally, I wouldn't have done it in a way in which the atmosphere in Jammu and Kashmir would have been adversely affected. But they had the laws on their side, they used them, and 8 months I was away. We've seen people detained for even longer. So it is, I mean, the situation is concerning, and I think all of us, particularly those in positions of power, need to realize that nobody is in office forever. Today's government will be tomorrow's opposition. Tomorrow's opposition aspires to be and perhaps will be in government one day. The same laws that are today throttling the voice of the opposition will be necessary for these people when they have to do that job.
Very true. I mean, every regime learns from the earlier regime. New tricks and older tricks are
reinforced.
They
just seem to go on improving them.
Yeah. So there is some amount of innovation that is happening there, and maybe we will rank somewhere up there on that index. But I mean, we are sitting in a state where dissent was born along with independence, where Periyar and others spoke about dissent brought about a different viewpoint on how society is to be organized. In 1967, this state voted out a party on imposition of a language, and that party has never come back. But there is also those people who say dissent is a conspiracy. Dissent has become fashionable. Uh, as a practicing politician, as somebody who is in public life, how do you conduct your activities? How does this impede you in terms of what you want to do, how you want to reach out to the people?
Well, in today's day and age, it makes you think twice. There was a time when I wouldn't have thought twice about accepting invitations to speak in colleges and universities. I wouldn't have thought twice about going to a conference or speaking in a college overseas. Today, I'm in a position where I won't accept an invitation.
And why would that?
Because I don't know whether there is that space any longer to dissent or disagree. There isn't, and that's a fact. I mean, you're talking to a person who thought nothing of traveling to Pakistan and meeting Pervez Musharraf. I wouldn't do that today. Not on your life. I mean, there's no amount of money in the world you could offer me to travel to that country and to meet the leadership there, simply because I just don't know what sort of reception I'll receive when I come back here. So I mean, that's the sort of worry one has, that again, nothing that is being said or being done threatens the unity of this country. I mean, to disagree and to say that dissent is now fashionable is extremely unfortunate, because you brought out the point. This country was born out of dissent. It was born out of a peaceful satyagraha led by Mahatma Gandhi, a non-violent move to dissent against the British. Now, how can a country that saw that now term dissent as fashionable? Dissent is the essence of democracy. I mean, we talk about being the largest democracy in the world, and in terms of numbers, we are. But are we the largest functioning democracy in the world? I think that we need to do some soul searching and ask ourselves.
But in Kashmir, dissent is an existential question. I'm sure you've traveled elsewhere. You grew up, and I remember you being educated in Bombay. I think the first time I saw you was at Supriya Pawar's wedding. When you go across other parts of the country, how do you see people viewing your dissent? How do they view the atmosphere of agreement or disagreement?
Well, I know a lot of people, particularly those aligned with the government in Delhi, would like to see my dissent as being anti-national, as being anti-India. And that's also become very, in fact, that's more fashionable than dissent now. That to disagree with the government is somehow to disagree with the country. And to criticize an individual or to criticize a government is somehow to criticize India. But that's not true. You can definitely disagree with the government of the day without disagreeing with India. And if to disagree with the government of the day is tantamount to disagreeing with the country, then what happened for those 10 years that Dr. Manmohan Singh was in power? Was criticizing him then not the same as criticizing India? You can't have your cake and eat it too. At that time, criticizing Dr. Manmohan Singh was pro-national. It was in the interests of the country, etc., etc. Yet today you're in a situation where if you criticize the current government, you're painted as being anti-national and anti-India.
So, just to step back a minute, is the dissent that you express, the anguish that I can sense in your voice, is that a consensus view among all Kashmiri parties, all the parties in Kashmir?
I would think so. Well, I don't think all, because there are some that are more closely aligned with the BJP than others. But those of us that are not, yes, it is definitely a situation of concern.
Now, your family and your party has had a historic relationship with the Congress and the people in the Congress, the Gandhi family. Recently, we saw you joining the Bharat Jodo Yatra, and there was much discussion about the white t-shirt that you wore. But you walked along with Rahul Gandhi. Is Rahul Gandhi walking along with you on Article 370?
No. I mean, there's no secret in that. the Congress has a different position on Article 370 than we do. And I'd like to say I understand that. I understand that. I'm not happy about it, but I do understand the compulsion that pushes the Congress to
Is
take
that
a
a
position
compulsion,
like
political compulsion, or is it
that.
a belief?
Of course there is. Look,
Is it a
on the
doctrine?
on the one hand, we expect the Congress to take on the BJP in the states that Sachin mattered, the states that matter. To do that in the current environment and still be able to talk about restoring 370 to Jammu and Kashmir, I believe is impossible. And why single out the Congress? I mean, other than a handful of political parties, show me one that has found common cause with the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Parties that my party has been aligned with in the past, people that my father considers as friends, people that my father left his own election campaign for to campaign for them. None of them have found common cause with Jammu and Kashmir on the question of Article 370. I think you can count a handful. You can count the DMK, you can count Mamta Banerjee and her party, the left parties. I don't think you can count another one after that.
So in the Bharat Jodo Yatra, when it passed through Kashmir, I noticed that the Mufti family, Mehbooba, and her family joined the Bharat Jodo Yatra. You joined the Bharat Jodo Yatra. I think Farooq Saab also joined at some point. Where does Gulam Nabi Azad stand in this?
I don't know. I really don't know. I wish I did, but I don't. I haven't had an opportunity to sit down with him and understand why he left the Congress the way that he did.
Has he expressed, are you in consensus? Does he concur with your view on Article 370?
I don't know. I don't know what
he has an Azad view.
Views. I don't know what Azad Saab's views and his new political party's views are on three. Well, actually, yeah, to some extent I do, because he made a speech in Uri where he said that people talking about the restoration of 370 are making fools of people. So yeah, I guess that's what his viewpoint is, and I vehemently disagree with that, because the matter is still alive in front of the Supreme Court. Why should we prejudge what the Supreme Court is going to do?
And you're hopeful of the...
You know, with every passing day, I'm more hopeful, because if the government had a strong case to make in the Supreme Court, they would have done everything possible to ensure hearings had started by now. The fact that we are in 2023 and hearings haven't started, to my mind, is the single biggest indicator that this government is deeply uncertain about its own defense of what it did on the 5th of August 2019.
So just step back 1 minute. We are now in the 3rd year after the revocation of Article 370. Have things improved in the paradise? Is it a better paradise? What's your top view?
Well, it depends.
The government's case is that the security situation has improved. That they had promised investments will happen. That people are able to move freely. We see some of that in the tourism aspect.
Which aspect do you see it in?
The government claims that there's a higher number of tourists. See, most of India will have to go by the numbers.
Can I just debunk the tourism numbers argument just for a second? Because, even I was amazed.
The whole contention that whether the paradise is better off without 370
I will come to that. But let's touch upon the tourism one, because even the Prime Minister talked about it in his speech in the Lok Sabha yesterday. I was amazed when the government released the tourism numbers and they were 1 crore 30 lakh something. And, I couldn't believe it, because having been chief minister myself, I just didn't know where these tourists were coming from. And I was saying, look, what did I do wrong that these people have done so correct that you have these numbers? Until you start breaking down the numbers, as a conscious decision, we never count religious pilgrims as tourists, simply because there's very little tourism activity associated with their visits. Particularly, let's say the ones who come for Mata Vaishno Devi's darshan, which is 1 crore plus. They come, they go to Katra, they climb to the cave, they do darshan, they go back. For the first time, Mata Vaishno Devi darshan were counted in tourism. So that's 1 crore plus right there. Then they counted the Amarnath Yatris, which is another 3 lakhs odd, somewhere there. On top of that, you add the regular tourist numbers, which we always have, which is about 15 lakhs, 16 lakhs, or something like that. That brings you to the number that the government released of about 1 crore 20 something lakh tourists. So all it was is a jugglery of numbers. The number of tourists coming into Kashmir is pretty much the same as it was during the good times in my government. And the reason I know this is because you haven't added a single new hotel bed since then. Nothing new. I mean, the investment that you talk about, we don't see it on the ground. There are no new factories, no new universities, no new colleges, no new hospitals, no new infrastructure for tourism. What has changed on the ground, and that much I will accept, is that there is less stone pelting to be seen. Now, whether this is because people's their ideology has changed, their approach has changed, or whether they're just too afraid, I don't know. But I will grant this much, that yes, there is less visible protest on the streets. But what hasn't improved is the targeting of minorities. I mean, you saw recently blasts in Jammu city. We haven't seen that in many years. You saw blasts in Rajouri targeting minorities. You've seen minorities targeted in Kashmir, something that we had almost completely forgotten over the last few years. And the final point I'll make, that if for a moment we accept that the security situation is conducive, it's good, why have we been denied an election?
Okay, I'll come to that once again. I visited Ladakh in 1990 at the height of Free Ladakh from Kashmir agitation. So the Ladakhis were in some ways not in consonant or not in tune with the valley's politics or the valley's political parties. The people of Jammu have constantly had some theory about 370. And so when 370 was revoked, there was jubilation in Jammu. There was, I think jubilation in some parts of Ladakh also. Now of course, Sonam Wanchuk and others are singing a new tune. So we don't know what the story is there. Are you saying that if tomorrow you poll them, these people will be on your side of the view, will dissent, or are concurring with the idea of revocation?
I'd like to believe that they'll be on my on my side of the fence for dissent, regardless of where they see Ladakh or Jammu. Because dissent is not just about one's own political ideology. It's also about the overall framework, the overall atmosphere in which one works. The fact that in 1990, the people of Ladakh could stand up and say, we don't want to be with Kashmir. Great, that's what dissent is all about. The fact that people in Jammu could say, look, we believe that the people of Kashmir have eaten up our rights. We don't want to be with Kashmir. Great, that is the freedom that they should have to be able to express that point of view. I may or may not agree with them, but I'd like the fact that they have that freedom, that space to be able to express that point of view. Today, when Sonam Wangchuk says that we were better off with Jammu and Kashmir than we are as a union territory, he's detained. The police surround him, and then he's given a bond to sign, basically gagging him for the foreseeable future. That's not space for dissent.
So I want to ask you an introspective question and then a political question. I think, Kaveri, how much time do we have? Okay. So we can also ask some of the youngsters to ask questions. But the introspect.
Oh, it's hidden behind the speaker. It says 12 minutes.
12 minutes, okay. So, do you think the parties born out of the valley, whether it was a national conference or the PDP, did right by Kashmiris, did right by the people in Jammu, and did right by the people in Ladakh? In these last 3 years, I'm sure you speak with Mehbooba Mufti.
I'd like to believe that we did the best that we could. Okay. It's unfair to expect me to give a completely unbiased sort of view, because I can't. I belong to that party. I would be lying if I told you we did everything. But I think it would be unfair on my party if I turned around and told you we did nothing. So I think it's better that let history judge us for what we've done.
Okay, so let's move to the elections. Do you think you will win? Do you think
Show me a political party that has ever approached an election saying, I don't think we'll win.
No, but
honestly,
But aren't you a politician with a difference just now?
Yes, I am, but I also am a politician who wants to win. And the worst way to win, or the easiest way to lose an election is to tell people before the first vote is even casted, look, that I don't think I'm going to win.
So you have said on television that the government of the day is scared or afraid or worried about holding the elections because they will lose the election. The counter thesis could be that maybe there is a coalition that is building between them and Mr. Azad or Ms. Mufti and Azad. Why do you think the elections are not being held? And what do you think will happen in the elections?
Look, so far elections have not been held because various roadblocks or stumbling blocks were put in the way.
We are in a different geography, so you might as well take the effort to explain the delimitation.
First and foremost, we were singled out for delimitation, which again was something that is objectionable, because the whole purpose of 5th August 2019 was to bring Jammu and Kashmir at par with the rest of the country. Yet having brought us at par with the rest of the country, you singled us out for delimitation. We are the only territory in the country whose delimitation will be done on the basis of the 2010 census. The rest of the country's delimitation will be done on the basis of the 2020 census. So that in itself was inherently unfair, regardless of all the other constitutional arguments. So first, you had delimitation.
So that exercise is done.
That was one delay. Then you had to revise the voter lists, which was another delay. Then you said winter has come, which has become another delay. Now, most recently, the Election Commission, they were as honest as they could be. They said, look, delimitation done, voter lists ready, polling booths identified, returning officers all done. Only two things now remain to be seen: the weather and the security situation. As much as the BJP may want, it is not going to snow in Kashmir in April. They may try all they like. They cannot organize snow in April.
मुमकिन नहीं है.
वो मुमकिन ही नहीं है. बाकी चीजें बहुत मुमकिन है. This is not mumkin. Okay, so there is no snow. So the weather is not of hindrance. Now, if you're telling me the security situation is stopping you from having an election, then what was 5th August 2019 about? Because you promised the country that 5th August, that 370 is the biggest stumbling block for peace in Jammu and Kashmir. All your elections previously have been with 370 in place, with whatever security environment there was there. So if you're not ready to have an election right now, one of only two things: the security environment is not conducive, in which case I'd like to hear that from the Prime Minister or the Home Minister. Let them stand up in Parliament and say, the security situation does not allow an election in Kashmir. Fine. If that is not the case, then the last thing that I can understand is that the BJP is afraid.
Have you had any conversation, communications with the government on when the elections will be held? That is an administrative question. The political question is, have you had any discussion, communication with the government and the BJP?
I've had no communication with anyone about when elections will be held. And I think, let's be honest, I think only two people in this country really know when elections in Jammu and Kashmir will be held. And neither of those two are speaking to me.
So those two people haven't spoken to you about a possible alliance either?
They haven't spoken to me about anything since the last time we met, which was when the Prime Minister called all of us. They don't call us and ask us what they think we should do in Jammu and Kashmir. They just do it.
Omar, you're a reasonably well-informed person. Are they having, those two people having a conversation with other people in the valley?
You're asking me questions that I can't possibly have the answer to. I hope they're talking to people in the valley, even if they're not talking to me, because I think it's important they hear at least what some of the people in the valley think. But there is no way I can sort of say that with any degree of certainty. That famous TV show, Game of Cards, House of Cards, where it said, you may possibly think that, but I couldn't possibly comment. So
So we have 5 minutes, and I want only questions from the student group behind. I see a white sleeve up there. Please stand up, identify yourself, and ask a question.
Anand Kumar, I'm studying law. Just a while ago, you had acknowledged that the number of tourists who are coming to Kashmir are only visiting Vaishno Devi and Amarnath. Do you acknowledge what happened to all the other temples that existed in Kashmir before that? from the period of 1947 till 2022. Is the environment there safe for minorities? What do you think about Pandit resettlement and
No, sorry.
Okay, okay.
Can I ask
about
you
the demographic balance?
what happened to temples up until 1990? I visited. I used to see all the temples in Srinagar or in the valley. What happened to temples up until 1990? Okay, I'll assume you believe that they were ransacked, which they weren't. Some temples were damaged in the once militancy started. A lot of those were reconstructed with government help. Some haven't been able to, but by and large, most of them are protected. I don't in any way condone what happened to the Kashmiri Pandits in the beginning of militancy. What happened was abominable. It should never have happened. Kashmiri Pandits should never have had their sense of security snatched away from them. I'll be the first person to say that they should be given that sense of security so they can come back and resettle where they left from. That being said, the environment for them to come back is a lot worse today than it was maybe 4 years ago, for various reasons. The fact that you have seen targeted attacks against minorities in Kashmir today, which is something we hadn't seen for many years before this, is a matter of deep concern, and it's something we should all ponder over.
Just a follow-up question on that. Do you think since 1990 there was ever a reasonable case, reasonable possibility of the Pandits being resettled in Kashmir? Was there a period, a year where this could have happened?
Yeah, I think while Dr. Manmohan Singh was in office, and we actually had a move to resettle a number of them. They were, I mean, I won't say they were in the lakhs, but in the thousands, with various jobs and other incentives to help them re-establish a productive life in the valley. There was a movement of some of these youngsters back into the valley. That has reversed today, because the people who had settled at that time, were working in the valley, are today agitating in Jammu, asking to be resettled back outside of the valley. So that was an opportunity that we had both to sort of move forward on the Kashmiri Pandit issue, on the Armed Forces Special Powers Act issue. This was a space that we had, but we don't have it any longer.
2 more questions, only students.
Good evening, I'm Jatin and I have a question. So when we talk about dissent and democracy, don't you think we have seen bigger protests recently, like whether it's anti-farm laws or anti-CAA, while in 1990 a whole community was forced to leave their homes and there was not even a murmur of a protest across the country from Kashmir to Kanyakumari?
No. I'm glad you touched upon the CAA, because I hardly think that's something that should be bragged about. The way in which the protesters who were protesting against the CAA are today facing cases. A lot of them are still incarcerated. Many of them under preventive detention. Is something that when you can Google it, please do, and you'll find a long list of people who are still detained. Let's not forget how the government tried to completely squash the farmers' protests, terming them, and even with anti-terror cases being filed against some of the leaders of that protest, economic offense cases being filed against them. So it's not as if the government didn't try to use the laws that it has at its disposal, both against the anti-CAA and the farmers' protests. So let's not try and give this impression here that the government was very magnanimous in allowing anti-CAA or the farmer protests. Now, as far as what happened in 1990, look, whether there were protests or not, I don't know. But I don't think you had very many people in the country who stood up and justified what happened to the Kashmiri Pandits. I mean, I know you're probably too young to remember newspaper coverage at that time, but ask the New Indian Express to pull out some of their archive material. I'm sure you'll find that newspapers, editorials, magazines, television news coverage, civil society, they were all resoundingly opposed to what was happening to the Kashmiri Pandits at that time. Yes, you may not have seen them on the streets doing it, but that doesn't mean they weren't opposed to it.
We have just one more question. Yes, that lady there.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Nandini. By definition, tourism includes pilgrimage tourism as well. And it's one of the ancient forms of tourism as well. So, while debunking the numbers that were mentioned in the Lok Sabha, may I know why you meant that, tourism cannot...
Look, I'll tell you why we don't count tourism as, and particularly in this respect. It's one thing to talk about, let's say, the Buddhist circuit and bring tourists from Thailand and elsewhere to Bihar and those parts, or you bring them to South India to visit the temples here. Our own experience with regard to, let's say, again, I'll make the point of the pilgrims who come to Mata Vaishno Devi. They don't go beyond the temple. Tourism works if you stay in a hotel, you visit restaurants, you go to the handicraft shops, you come to Chennai and then you go to the neighboring towns. You leave Chennai, go to Pondicherry. Now that's tourism. But if I was to come to Chennai, land at the airport, drive straight to the temple, do my darshan at the temple, come back to the airport, get in the plane and fly out within a space of 6 hours, how can you count me as a tourist? What have I contributed to your economy? Now I'm not saying that we don't want people like that to come. Of course, their beliefs and the fact that we're able to have them there is a huge honor for us. But they don't contribute to the economy as a tourist. They don't come and stay in hotels. They don't visit, let's say, Gulmarg or Srinagar or even in Jammu. They don't go to Patni Top. They don't go to the lakes there. That's why, as a conscious decision, we don't count them as tourists. It's as simple as that. It's not that we in any way sort of try to undermine their importance to us. It's simple that we don't consider their visit as part of tourism. That's all, nothing else.
Thank you. I think the board says time's up. You've been very candid and very passionate in your call, in your exposition of this cause. And a big round of applause to Omar Abdullah to come here and speak from a land that is in descent to the original land of dissent. Thank you.